Have you ever found yourself justifying someone's toxic behavior because you didn't want to face the painful truth? What if the relationships you've tolerated weren't love at all, but a reflection of an emotional wound that's been controlling your choices? In today's video, we're diving deep into the hidden behaviors that many of us unknowingly accept as normal. But they're emotional traps that chip away at our sense of self. From covert manipulation disguised as love to gaslighting that makes you doubt your reality. These toxic patterns subtly distort your inner world. And here's the shocking truth: the longer you tolerate them, the more they start to feel like what you deserve. But the truth is, you don't deserve to be belittled, dismissed, or controlled. You deserve respect, empathy, and a love that nurtures your essence. Stay with us as we explore Carl Jung's profound wisdom on individuation and how breaking free from these toxic cycles isn't just about leaving a relationship, it's about reclaiming your authenticity and returning to yourself. By the end of this video, you'll understand why these behaviors aren't just damaging, they're signs of an unconscious wound that needs healing. You'll discover how to recognize them, confront them, and transform your relationships for the better. Don't miss this empowering journey towards self-respect and emotional freedom. Stick around till the end to uncover the powerful steps you can take today to stop the cycle of hurt and start living a life that honors your true worth. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. 1. Covert emotional manipulation. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you felt a deep sense of guilt for setting boundaries? Or maybe you felt wrong for simply having needs of your own, or for not conforming to someone else's expectations. This type of emotional manipulation is far more insidious than it appears. It chips away at the very core of who you are, making you question your worth, your needs, and your right to exist as your authentic self. What begins as a subtle nudge, you're too demanding or you're too sensitive, turns into an overwhelming emotional weight that makes you feel as though you must sacrifice your truth to maintain peace or avoid rejection. In essence, it's not just your boundaries that are being attacked, it's your soul's very foundation. Carl Jung, a brilliant psychologist, understood that the soul becomes sick when its truth is denied. The sickness begins when you find yourself adapting, becoming someone you're not, just to avoid someone else's emotional punishment. It's easy to tell yourself that you're just trying to keep the peace, but deep down, you know something is eroding inside of you. The moment you begin to compromise who you are just to appease someone else is the moment you start to lose yourself. Healing can only begin when you realize that this pattern of adaptation is hurting you. It is vital to recognize when you are no longer acting from a place of authentic desire, but instead from guilt or fear of losing the other person. That is the moment you must stand firm in your truth, even when it feels terrifying. Even when you feel that the other person might not understand or accept your boundaries. The truth is, you can never truly lose someone who loves you for who you are not, for who you pretend to be. Exercise. Think back to moments when you acted out of guilt instead of authentic desire. What motivated your actions? Fear of rejection, the need to please, or the belief that you weren't enough as you are? What patterns do you notice repeating in these instances? Who are the people in your life who tend to trigger this guilt in you? These are important questions to ask yourself as you begin your journey toward emotional freedom and self-empowerment. 2. Contempt, disguised as honesty. Certain people believe that being blunt or direct permits them to speak hurtful, cutting words. They might say things like, "I'm just being honest," or "I'm just telling it," like it is as though their harshness is justified by their claim of truthfulness. But let's be real, honesty without compassion is not honesty. It's cruelty, dressed in a cloak of righteousness. These words can wound in ways that are deep and lasting. The pain from harsh words spoken in the name of honesty can sometimes linger for years long after the person has forgotten they even said it. Jung recognized that a true personality thrives on positive recognition and affirmation. When we are consistently criticized, belittled, or made to feel small, we begin to wither. The very foundation of our self-worth is eroded. And in that state, it becomes harder and harder to distinguish between the voice of truth and the voice of cruelty. But here's what you need to know. Love never seeks to tear you down. True love builds you up. True love makes you feel seen, heard, and valued. When someone truly loves you, they don't speak to you as though you are less than or as though you don't deserve respect. If someone truly cares about you, they would never use their words to wound you. Exercise. Think about the phrases that have hurt you the most in your life. What words have you carried with you, allowing them to shape your sense of self-worth? Are those words truly constructive, or were they just an attempt by someone to control you? Were they meant to teach you or manipulate you? Understanding the difference between constructive honesty and destructive criticism is vital in protecting your emotional health. Take the time to reflect on these wounds and ask yourself, are they my truth or are they someone else's? 3. Control disguised as protection. Have you ever had someone try to control your decisions, your relationships, or your personal space, all under the guise of protection? This is a tactic that manipulates your emotions and your perception of love, convincing you that restricting your freedom is somehow in your best interest. They might say things like, "I'm just trying to protect you," or "You don't know what's best for you." But let's take a moment to be clear. Love is never about restricting your freedom. Love is about supporting you in becoming the best, most authentic version of yourself. When someone tries to control you, whether by dictating who you can be friends with, what you can wear, or how you spend your time, they are not acting out of love. They are acting out of fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being vulnerable, and a deep-seated need for dominance. Jung spoke of power as the shadow aspect of the self, the dark part that seeks to control others to avoid confronting its inner chaos. No one who truly loves you would ever try to limit your freedom. True love celebrates your independence, supports your choices, and trusts you to make decisions for yourself. Exercise. Reflect on the areas of your life where you felt your freedom was restricted. Did you mistake this control for love? Was it disguised as concern or protection, but in reality, was it more about their need to dominate? Ask yourself why you allowed it to happen. Was it because you didn't know any better at the time? Or did you confuse control with care? The first step to reclaiming your freedom is recognizing that it was never truly love that sought to control you. True love sets you free. 4. Gaslighting, distortion of your emotional reality. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious forms of emotional manipulation because it chips away at your very perception of reality. Imagine this. You're feeling something real and valid, but the moment you express that emotion, someone denies it. They make you feel like you're exaggerating, or worse, that you're crazy for even thinking or feeling what you do. You start to question your thoughts, your own emotions, and your own experiences. Jung once said, "What irritates us in others can lead to self-understanding." But when it comes to gaslighting, it's not just irritation. This kind of manipulation leads to deep self-doubt and confusion. You may find yourself thinking, maybe I am being too sensitive. Maybe it's just in my head. And with each instance, something inside you starts to break. Your trust in yourself starts to fade, and your sense of reality becomes blurred. When someone constantly distorts your truth, you begin to lose sight of who you really are and what you truly feel. Your emotions become invalidated, and you are made to believe that your feelings are not worthy of attention or respect. This is incredibly damaging. If you're experiencing this, it's crucial to regain control over your emotional reality. You are not crazy. Your feelings are valid, and no one has the right to make you doubt your perception. Exercise. Think back to a moment when you felt a strong emotion, but someone made you doubt it. How did you talk to yourself afterward? Did you convince yourself that you were overreacting? Did you trust yourself, or did you let someone else's words break down your confidence? This is the first step in reclaiming your emotional truth, acknowledging when you let someone else distort your reality, and finding your way back to believing in your feelings. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. 5. Disdain for your inner world. Some people will dismiss your dreams, passions, or interests simply because they don't understand or share them. They'll make you feel like what excites you or what you love is unimportant or silly. These are the people who, with a flick of a dismissive comment, try to extinguish your inner fire. It's painful. It's as if they are telling you that the things that make your heart beat faster, the things that make you feel alive, are not worth pursuing. But here's the truth. No one has the right to extinguish your light. Carl Jung said, "What you deny submits you. What you accept transforms you." When you allow someone else to silence your passions, you let their limitations become yours. You deny the very essence of who you are in an attempt to fit into someone else's emotional reality. But doing so will only shrink you and dim your spark. Your inner world is sacred. Your dreams, your passions, your interests, they are all a part of what makes you uniquely you. Never let anyone make you feel that your inner world isn't worthy of existence. You were born with the right to pursue what sets your soul on fire. Do not shrink to fit into an emotional space that doesn't honor your true self. Exercise. Reflect on the parts of yourself that you have silenced over time to avoid bothering someone or to fit into someone else's expectations. What aspects of yourself have you hidden away out of fear that they would not be accepted? What voice inside of you is begging to be heard again? Listen to it. The world needs your authentic self, and it's time you let that self shine. 6. Constant lack of empathy. Everyone has their moments when they fail to be empathetic. We all have times when we are so absorbed in our struggles that we can't fully tune into someone else's pain. But if you're consistently with someone who never validates your emotions, someone who consistently minimizes your pain, who turns everything back to themselves and never really listens, that's a red flag. Over time, being in this kind of relationship erodes your spirit. It wears you down. You begin to feel like your emotional needs are invisible, like you don't matter, like your pain is not worth attention. And when you experience this lack of empathy from someone you care about, someone you trust, it stings all the more. Jung emphasized that without empathy, there is no deep connection, just an exchange of superficial needs. Empathy is the bedrock of genuine human connection. Without it, relationships are hollow. If you're in a relationship where your emotions are constantly dismissed or ignored, know that it's not your fault. You deserve empathy. You deserve someone who will meet you where you are, who will validate your emotions, and who will hold space for your pain. You don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Your emotions are valid, and it's okay to expect that the people in your life treat them as such. Exercise. Think back to the last time you cried or were in pain, either emotionally or physically, and shared it with someone. Did they support you or did they judge you? What did you need in that moment? Did they acknowledge your pain or did they brush it off? Recognizing the difference between someone who truly cares and someone emotionally unavailable is vital to your emotional well-being. You deserve to be seen, heard, and supported, never dismissed or invalidated. 7. Repeated and justified betrayal. Have you ever been hurt by someone you care about, only to have them apologize, promising never to do it again? But then time and time again, they repeat the same hurtful behavior and the cycle continues. At first, you might believe their apology, trusting that they truly regret their actions. But as the pattern repeats, you start to question yourself. Maybe they didn't mean it the last time. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. This is one of the most painful forms of betrayal because it often comes with a justification. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you. It won't happen again. But the truth is, if there is no change in behavior, the apology is nothing more than a tactic to keep you in relationship, not a sign of genuine growth or remorse. Carl Jung spoke about the concept of compulsive repetition, referring to it as a symptom of unhealed trauma. When someone continuously hurts you with the same actions and convinces you that it was just an accident, you're not seeing the truth. You're trapped in a cycle of deceit, one that prevents you from healing. This cycle of betrayal is dangerous because it makes you question your instincts, your worth, and your ability to trust. It erodes your sense of self and leaves you emotionally drained. It's crucial to break free from this cycle before it becomes too late to realize that an apology without any real change is just manipulation. Exercise. Take a moment to create a timeline of all the times you've told yourself, "This is the last time," only to go back and endure the same hurt. What kept you there? What are you really afraid of? Are you afraid of being alone, of facing the truth, or perhaps of confronting the person you've allowed to betray you? Recognize these fears and understand that your peace, your healing, and your self-respect are worth more than repeating the same cycle of hurt. 8. Selfishness, disguised as self-sufficiency. Some relationships can feel incredibly one-sided. You're the one who's always giving, remembering the important dates, offering support, making sacrifices, while the other person only seems to show up when they need something. They act like they don't need you, and in their eyes, perhaps they don't. But here's the painful truth. This isn't self-sufficiency, it's selfishness disguised as independence. These individuals are so consumed with their world, their own needs, and their desires that they fail to recognize or appreciate the emotional labor you're putting in. They only give when it's convenient for them, and as a result, the relationship becomes an exhausting emotional transaction. You keep giving, but they never truly invest. This dynamic can be incredibly draining because while you're emotionally invested, they treat the relationship as if it's just an obligation on their end. Love is a bond, a give and take, a dance where both individuals equally contribute. But when one person is always holding the relationship together, remembering, caring, and planning, while the other simply takes it, becomes emotional exploitation. You're not in a partnership, you're in an unhealthy power dynamic. Exercise. Take a step back and evaluate your relationships. In which ones do you feel you're giving more than 70%? How does that make you feel? Do you feel resentful, unappreciated, or invisible? Are you continuing to give because you hope things will change or because you're afraid to address the imbalance? Ask yourself what you truly need from these relationships and whether you're willing to accept more from those who are emotionally distant or selfish. 9. Constant sarcasm as a form of connection. Sarcasm is often used as a shield, a way to avoid true vulnerability or to mask hurt. When sarcasm becomes the primary way someone communicates with you, it can feel like a constant barrage of passive-aggressive comments disguised as humor. It leaves invisible wounds that cut deep but are hard to pinpoint because they're wrapped in a joking tone. The truth is, sarcasm is often just a manifestation of something deeper, repressed contempt. Jung once said that the unconscious finds ways to express what we don't dare say aloud, and sarcasm is often one of those ways. It's a sneaky form of emotional manipulation because it allows the speaker to be cruel without directly facing the consequences of their words. While it might seem funny in the moment, sarcasm often hides underlying feelings of disdain, frustration, or contempt. It chips away at your self-esteem because it makes you question the true intentions behind the words. Are they just joking? Or is there something deeper they're not saying? The emotional toll can be more damaging than you realize because the hurt is hidden beneath a veil of humor, leaving you unsure of how to react or how to defend yourself. Exercise. Reflect on the sarcastic phrases that have stuck with you over time. What were they trying to communicate? What emotions do you think were hiding behind them? Anger, resentment, frustration, or even jealousy. Sarcasm may seem like a harmless way to connect, but it often reveals deeper emotional truths that need to be acknowledged. How can you confront these hidden feelings and stop tolerating this passive aggression in your relationships? 10. Emotional indifference as punishment. There's no quieter, more insidious way to punish someone than by refusing to acknowledge them, by withdrawing emotionally, or by pretending they don't even exist. This act of emotional withdrawal is a powerful tool of manipulation. It creates a silence so loud it screams in your soul. It's an emotionally violent act, one that doesn't just hurt. It erodes your sense of worth, leaving you questioning your existence, your value, and your place in the world. Carl Jung understood that human beings are inherently social creatures. We need connection, empathy, and communication to maintain our sense of self. Without these vital components, we begin to fragment emotionally. To be consistently ignored, to be emotionally abandoned without any closure, is not just neglect. It's a slow, methodical destruction of your emotional integrity. It's a form of punishment that cuts deeper than any physical wound could ever reach, because it makes you feel invisible, as though you don't matter. The agony of being ignored, even for a moment, can feel like a lifetime. It affects your self-image, your confidence, and your mental well-being. This behavior is not neutral. It's a deliberate attempt to control, to manipulate, and to assert power over you. It is a way of making you feel small, insignificant, and desperate for recognition. It's as though the other person is telling you that you don't deserve to be seen, to be heard, or to exist as you are. This kind of treatment can be profoundly damaging, leaving you questioning your worth constantly, second-guessing your actions, and feeling isolated even when you're physically surrounded by people. Exercise. Reflect on a time when you were intentionally ignored or made to feel invisible. How did that experience affect your self-image? How did you internalize it? Did you start to believe that you didn't deserve to be seen, or did it spark a desire to fight, to be acknowledged again? What actions did you take in an attempt to be seen? Recognize the impact this emotional neglect had on you. and understand that this behavior is not about your worth. It's about the other person's inability to connect with or respect you. The long-term psychological consequences of accepting toxic behaviors. All of these harmful behaviors, gaslighting, emotional withdrawal, repeated betrayal, have long-lasting psychological consequences. They are not just momentary lapses or misunderstandings. They are patterns that take root in your subconscious and grow over time. They slowly seep into your soul, clouding your sense of self-worth, distorting your view of love, and leaving you emotionally fragmented. The more you tolerate these behaviors, the more they become normalized in your life. They become the lens through which you see yourself and your relationships. And worst of all, they begin to feel like what you deserve. But here's the truth: you don't deserve to be manipulated, minimized, or ignored. You deserve a space where you can breathe freely, where you can speak your truth without fear of judgment, where you can exist without constantly justifying your emotions or actions. You deserve to be loved with respect, dignity, and understanding, not with silence, cruelty, or neglect. Carl Jung didn't teach us to hate those who hurt us, nor to seek vengeance. His message was clear: stop hating yourself for allowing what hurts you. He asked us to recognize the patterns we've accepted and begin to break free from them. This is where true healing begins. When you stop tolerating toxic behaviors, you start to reclaim your power, your voice, and your peace. The unconscious wounds that shape our relationships. Jung's work on the shadow wasn't just about recognizing the negative aspects of ourselves. It was about bringing awareness to all the parts of us that we've repressed, neglected, or buried deep down. This includes our pain, our unmet needs, our voice, and yes, our dignity. Tolerating unacceptable behaviors in relationships is often a way of reinforcing that shadow. It's as if we're hiding behind the mask of silence, not daring to stand up for what we deserve because we don't believe we're worthy of it. Repeating toxic relationships isn't a sign of emotional weakness. It's a symptom of an unconscious wound that has never been healed. Sigmund Freud explained that the compulsion to repeat past trauma arises when that trauma hasn't been processed or resolved. When we don't confront our wounds, we unconsciously seek out relationships that mirror those old patterns, just hoping that this time will be different. It's not masochism that drives this cycle, it's unresolved hope. We want to believe that we can heal through love, but instead, we keep attracting the same types of people who hurt us in the same ways. When you normalize manipulation, indifference, or emotional exploitation, you make a pact with that wound. And that pact isn't something spoken aloud. It's an emotional agreement, a decision to accept a sliver of affection even when it's wrapped in neglect. But Jung reminds us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to shape your life, and you'll mistake it for fate. Deep psychological work isn't about hating those who have hurt you. It's about understanding how those painful experiences have shaped you and why you continue to accept them. It's about recognizing that you have the power to choose differently. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. The dangers of justifying the hurt. There's something more dangerous than simply being hurt, justifying the hurt. When you justify mistreatment, you start to swallow the poison, convincing yourself that it's not that bad, that it's just part of life, or that it's your fault for being too sensitive. But the gravity of the harm doesn't lie in the event itself. It lies in how you internalize it. It's in the quiet, incremental way that your soul begins to shrink, to close off, to stop fighting for what it needs. The moment you start justifying toxic behaviors is the moment you allow yourself to be convinced that this is all you deserve. Being in a relationship where you're humiliated, ignored, or belittled is not a sign of a lack of options. It's a sign of an emotional system that has been conditioned to believe that anything is better than being alone. This is where Jung's work aligns with Alfred Adler's theories. When you feel inherently inferior, you become prone to accepting relationships that reinforce that belief. You carry the weight of these unhealthy dynamics without realizing that you're afraid of abandonment more than you are afraid of the emotional damage. Transformation begins with boundaries. The moment you decide there are behaviors you will no longer tolerate, whether it's emotional withdrawal, manipulation, or a lack of empathy, it's a deeply spiritual, psychological, and emotional act. This is the moment you stop waiting for the world to treat you well and begin treating yourself the way you always deserve to be treated. That internal shift, though invisible to others, is so powerful that it changes everything. It redefines your boundaries, strengthens your sense of self, and reclaims your dignity. Freud's concept of the pleasure principle taught us that we are driven to avoid pain and seek pleasure. But when you've learned to associate love with suffering, pleasure becomes confused. You begin to mistake emotional chaos for connection, believing that intensity, drama, and volatility are signs of passion or love. But in truth, they are echoes of an old wounded pattern. Real love is not constant confusion or emotional adrenaline. It's consistency, understanding, and respect, cutting the toxic chains. Many of these toxic behaviors don't hurt because they're overt. They hurt because they're subtle. They come from the people you love most, and that makes them all the more dangerous. When someone you still idealize plays with your emotions, it becomes difficult to set boundaries because you've already excused or justified their behavior. That's why Jung spoke of individuation, the process of breaking the illusion that someone else can save you. You must learn to save yourself, to defend your boundaries, and to stop handing your emotional power to those who seek to diminish you. Transformation begins when you stand up for yourself, not out of hatred, but with firmness, not with violence, but with truth. This is where dignity stops being a theory and becomes a living, breathing action. Real love doesn't play with your wounds. It honors, respects, and nurtures them. If someone in your life continues to use your vulnerabilities against you, that is not love. It's time to cut off that toxic pattern, stop justifying it, and demand the love and respect you deserve. The subtlety of unacceptable behavior. The most damaging behaviors aren't always loud or obvious. Sometimes they hide in the everyday, in the little dismissive comments that slowly chip away at your self-worth. "I don't care what happens to you," said with a shrug, or "do whatever you want," spoken with contempt. These small words dripping with indifference convey far more harm than one might initially realize. And it's not just the harsh words that wound, it's the attitude behind them, the refusal to acknowledge your presence, your needs, your pain. You don't need someone to shout at you to be mistreated. The consistent negation of your very existence, the steady, silent message that you don't matter, is far more emotionally devastating. This kind of emotional withdrawal is not neutral. It is a form of emotional violence that leaves scars far deeper than any physical blow. Carl Jung spoke of relationships as mirrors. When someone makes you feel small, voiceless, or confused, it's not necessarily about you. It's often about their inability to face their shadow, their insecurities projected onto you. They are not creating new wounds. They are triggering old ones' wounds you may not even know how to face yet. But now you can begin to see them for what they are: patterns, cycles, emotional traps that don't need to continue. Viktor Frankl famously distinguished between suffering that transforms and suffering that destroys. The suffering we endure in unhealthy relationships, the suffering of emotional neglect and cruelty, can either break us or catalyze our healing. But this healing comes with a choice to break free, to stop tolerating the patterns that diminish us, and to reclaim our right to love and be loved in a way that honors our dignity. The awakening to your true self. The soul, as Jung so wisely noted, cannot pretend coherence. You may try to appear okay on the outside, smiling on social media, saying everything is fine, and pretending you have it all under control. But deep inside, there's a different truth. The feelings of anguish, insomnia, anxiety, and constant confusion are not just bad days or mood swings. They are signals from your inner world telling you that something in your emotional life is deeply off balance. Something isn't working, and you can't keep pretending that it is. You're here today reading these words because part of you is awakening. It's that part of you that no longer wants to live a half-life. You don't want rationed love relationships where you have to justify your existence or apologize for being yourself. True emotional health starts when you decide to stop trading your peace for the sake of someone else's comfort. That moment may not come with fireworks, but it's the beginning of a new life, a life where you finally breathe freely. Jung's words are a powerful reminder. The greatest privilege of life is to be who you truly are. And when you understand that, you also understand the cost of disguising yourself, of pretending to be someone you're not just to gain acceptance. When you wear a mask for too long, the danger is not just in losing your authenticity. It's in losing your identity entirely. If you've had to become someone else to be loved that wasn't love, it was an emotional transaction. You were negotiating your essence And you came into this world not to negotiate, but to share your truth. The toxic cycle of emotional contempt. When someone makes you feel like your emotions are too much, that your boundaries are a problem, or that your pain is exaggerated, they are projecting their fears, insecurities, and shadows onto you. Jung believed that we project what we dare not face in ourselves, and when we tolerate these projections, we allow others to unload their unresolved darkness onto us. This is a deeply unacceptable behavior, and it's often the most subtle form of emotional violence, making you feel like you are the problem for simply being human, for feeling what is natural, for needing what is natural. Another harmful behavior that goes unspoken is when someone mocks your healing process. This attitude, subtle but deeply hurtful, reflects an utter disconnection from the soul's evolution. Jung spoke about individuation, the process of becoming the person you were always meant to be. But for many people, the sight of someone else transforming into their authentic self is unsettling. It forces them to confront their stagnation, and instead of supporting you, they try to drag you back to where they are, mocking your progress. This behavior is not just a dismissal of your healing, it's an attempt to keep you in their emotional prison. The dangers of minimizing your emotions. When your emotions are minimized, when they're treated as a nuisance, or worse, when they're labeled as too much or too dramatic, you are not in an emotionally healthy space. Your sadness, fear, and anger are not mistakes or overreactions. They are messenger signals from your soul that something needs to change. The most unacceptable behaviors from a Jungian perspective occur when someone forces you to betray your intuition. Jung said that intuition is a psychic function that conveys perceptions through the unconscious. And when a relationship constantly makes you doubt your gut feelings, you lose your inner compass. Without your intuition to guide you, you lose your way. When you tolerate the constant minimization of your emotional efforts, you're participating in a slow but silent aggression that erodes your inner truth. The more you accept this treatment, the further you drift from your authentic self, from your innate wisdom. The destructive message of invalidation. Jung emphasized that the soul needs recognition to flourish. This recognition is not just about praise or attention, it's about being truly seen and valued for who you are. When your attempts to improve, to heal, or to grow are ignored or treated as insignificant, the message you internalize is crystal clear. No matter what you do, it'll never be enough. That is one of the most destructive messages a psyche can receive. The constant invalidation of your efforts to become a better, more authentic version of yourself chips away at your self-esteem, making you believe that your worth is conditional. When someone demands that you forgive them without any real change, they are not asking for redemption. They are asking for impunity. They want to continue harming you without facing the consequences. True change comes from confronting the shadow within, not from repeating the same hurtful behaviors while expecting forgiveness. Forgiveness, in its true form, means letting go with awareness, not exposing yourself to the same wound over and over again. Breaking the emotional asymmetry. One of the greatest illusions in unhealthy relationships is the idea that empathy must be earned through sacrifice. Jung would have said the opposite: sacrifice without recognition of your truth only leads to resentment. And resentment is a sign that you've tolerated the intolerable. If you're always the one yielding, silencing, or adapting to keep the peace, you're not in a reciprocal relationship. You're in an emotional asymmetry that will exhaust you. True love requires balance. It requires mutual respect, empathy, and recognition. It requires space for both people to grow, to speak their truth, and to be seen for who they truly are. If your relationship demands that you shrink, that you silence your needs, or that you compromise your emotional well-being for the sake of the other person, then it's no longer love. It's emotional exploitation. And it's time to recognize it for what it is. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. The power of separation and the path to individuation. Sometimes the most loving act toward yourself is to walk away from someone who harms you, even if they claim to love you. True love never demands that you destroy yourself to keep it alive. If a relationship forces you to sacrifice your mental health, your peace, or your dignity, it's time to let go. Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming the person you were meant to be, often requires separation. The most loving thing you can do for yourself is to honor your truth, to set boundaries, and to walk away from relationships that undermine your self-worth. If you're in a relationship where you cannot express your true feelings without fearing the other person's reaction, you are in an emotionally unsafe environment. Your emotional foundation cannot be built on silent surrender and self-forgetting. You cannot live a fulfilling life if your soul is held hostage by the fear of rejection or the need to constantly justify your existence. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Awakening to your truth. The most dangerous relationships are not the ones that shout at you. They are the ones that dim you without you noticing. These relationships drain you, emotionally make you doubt yourself, and force you to compromise your dignity in the name of love. But love is never constant confusion. It's clarity, trust, and mutual respect. You were not born to eat emotional crumbs. You were born to sit at the table of your truth and to be loved for who you truly are. The first step toward healing is stopping the cycle of self-forgetting. It's time to wake up to recognize that you deserve more than the emotional crumbs that others may offer. Your truth matters, your emotions matter, and you deserve to be loved with the depth and respect that reflects your worth. It starts with you, and it starts today. Unconditional love for yourself, breaking free from the chains of emotional neglect. Carl Jung spoke profoundly about the necessity of unconditional positive self-regard, loving yourself not only when you're strong, productive, or admired, but also when you're broken, sad, vulnerable, or confused. This concept challenges us to be kind to ourselves even when we feel at our weakest. If someone only loves you when you're good, they don't truly love you, they love your facade. But the truth is, you're not a facade. You are a whole person worthy of love and respect, no matter where you are in your life. Some relationships tend to infantilize us. They make us feel like we have to behave a certain way to avoid being punished with silence, indifference, or abandonment. That's not love. That's emotional regression. True adult love is not about controlling or manipulating. It's about mutual respect, understanding, and growth. Jung reminded us that inner growth involves shedding the wounded child seeking constant approval and embracing the adult who sets healthy boundaries without guilt. It's about standing firm in your truth, no longer apologizing for your needs, and honoring your emotional health. The fear of facing the void, finding yourself. Emotional dependency often arises from the fear of facing your inner void, the fear that something is missing, something you cannot fill. But here's the truth, that void isn't filled by another person. It's filled by you. It's filled by your inner gaze, your daily care, and your commitment to never abandoning yourself for anyone else. As D.W. Winnicott said, "The good enough mother isn't perfect. She's the one who doesn't abandon." Be that support for yourself, enduring in silence in an attempt to keep the peace or avoid confrontation isn't love, it's unresolved trauma. That trauma is not healed by time alone, but by conscious action, reflection, therapy, and decisions that build your freedom. Time does not heal wounds. Your awareness and willingness to face those wounds head on do. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are, and you are not defined by your wounds. You are defined by the strength it takes to face them and rise, breaking the cycle of mistreatment. You may have spent years tolerating what you don't deserve because no one taught you to discern. After all, you grew up in an environment where mistreatment was normalized, where shouting was common, where contempt was routine. But just because you grew up that way doesn't mean you have to live that way. Awareness changes destiny, and you're already aware. Your value isn't something that can be negotiated, begged for, or bought. It's recognized, upheld, and honored. Every time you say, "I won't allow this anymore," you are honoring your soul. When you honor your soul, it opens pathways that once seemed impossible. You stop accepting behavior that diminishes you and start creating space for people who will recognize your worth. Psychology shows that when someone is consistently surrounded by harmful relationships, it's not a result of bad luck. It's the result of unconscious programming. As Jung said, "You're not what happened to you. You're what you choose to become from what happened. And today, you can choose differently. You can choose to break free from toxic patterns and create a life where you are treated with respect, love, and dignity." Transformation, it begins within. You're not here to endure. You're here to transform. That transformation doesn't start with the other person. It starts when you stop explaining the inexplicable, justifying the unjustifiable, and loving someone who doesn't even know how to love themselves. You were not put on this earth to constantly prove your worth to others, to shrink, to sacrifice your dignity for the sake of maintaining a relationship. You are here to honor your soul and to create the life you were meant to live. There's a powerful force within you that's been silenced for years, your intuition. Your intuition doesn't shout, it whispers. But that whisper holds more truth than 1,000 external opinions. Jung spoke of intuition as a bridge to the unconscious. Don't ignore it. Listen. It knows what your mind is still afraid to accept. Breaking the cycle of trauma and toxic loyalty. Trauma often causes us to become hyper-loyal to those who hurt us. The brain, in its effort to survive, prefers the familiar, even if it's painful. But you didn't come into this world to repeat the same painful stories. You came to write your own. And in your story, there is no longer room for those who do not know how to care for you. Every time you forgive someone without them changing, your unconscious learns that no matter how much they hurt you, you will always come back. That's not nobility. It's self-abandonment. And when your soul is abandoned too many times, it begins to dim. You stop recognizing your reflection. The most sacred work you can do isn't about becoming stronger. It's about becoming more honest, more coherent, and more true to yourself. From that space, the unacceptable no longer fits because your energy no longer vibrates in lack. It vibrates in clarity. The power of self-respect and boundaries. Want to be respected? Respect yourself first. Want to be cared for? Care for yourself. Want to be chosen unconditionally? Choose yourself unconditionally, because no one will give you what you haven't decided to uphold within. The deepest relationships aren't those that give you everything. They're the ones that don't take anything essential from you. If someone demands that you leave parts of yourself behind to stay, they don't want a relationship, they want a mold. And you're not moldable. You're authentic. Some wounds continue to reopen because you haven't learned to say, "Not here." That simple phrase, when spoken from the heart, can change your entire life. When you say it with clarity and conviction, the universe aligns with your truth. Awakening and embracing the change. You're not broken. You're awakening. You're emerging from years of emotional programming that taught you that love means suffering, that wanting means yielding until you disappear, and that company is worth more than peace. But Jung made it clear, those who look outward dream, those who look inward awaken. You're no longer here to dream stories where you always lose. You've been loyal to those who didn't care for you. You've given love without reservation, hoping they'd understand your soul. But the truth is, no one will understand your soul if you don't value it first. Emotional dignity is not arrogance. It's the deep-rooted foundation from which real love grows. Without it, everything that blooms will be fragile. From today forward, you can stop apologizing for feeling, for setting boundaries, for walking away from what no longer serves you. You don't need an elaborate justification to protect your peace. You're awakening the story of your true self. You have the right to close the door with the same energy you once left it open with out of fear of being alone. Life will keep testing you, but now you have something you didn't have before clarity. This clarity is not something you can buy. It is earned through pain, tough decisions, and emotional courage. Now that you have it, now that you've awakened, don't fall back asleep in the face of what you know harms you. Some people won't understand your transformation. They'll call you exaggerated, selfish, or cold, but you don't owe them an explanation. They didn't feel your silent nights, your hidden tears, or your attempts to fit into something too small for you. Let them think what they want. Keep walking. Embrace your transformation. The soul doesn't shout, but when it's ignored too many times, it starts breaking you from within. That pain is its final attempt to say, listen to me. Don't wait until you hit rock bottom to make the change. Do it today. Do it because you've understood that love isn't begged for, it's honored. Remember this, there's no healing without decision, no freedom without boundaries, and no self-love without renouncing self-deception. When you bring those three truths together in your heart, you stop seeking mediocre loves and start building relationships that reflect your integrity. This is your moment. The story of your life is unfolding right now, and with every step you take towards honoring your soul, you are writing the narrative of your true self. Stay with it. Stay with your truth. You are deserving of all the love, peace, and respect that you've been searching for. 1. The story of awakening, a journey to self-respect and true love. The first time he saw her, James thought he had found something sacred. She was magnetic, intelligent, unpredictable, and alive. There was a mysterious depth to her, a certain pull that made him feel seen in a way no one had before. But as time went on, he realized she wasn't seeing him. She was seeing his emptiness, his unspoken fears, his need to be validated. What he had mistaken for love was, in reality, a reflection of his oldest emotional wound, the desperate need to feel seen. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 4 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. James was 33 years old, the son of a father who communicated through silence, and a mother who never quite knew how to set boundaries. Growing up, he believed that love was conditional, that to be loved, he had to be useful, perfect, flawless. When she came into his life, she became his emotional project. He worked tirelessly to make her happy, convinced that if he could just make her feel needed, she would never leave. At first, everything felt right. She praised him, sought him out, and made him feel important. She told him he was the most sensitive person she had ever met. But as the days wore on, things began to shift. The silences between them became punishments, criticisms masked as humor, apologies made without real change. The love he once felt began to fade, replaced by a confusing mix of affection and contempt. Despite the growing emotional distance, James justified it all. He told himself that all relationships had their ups and downs, that she just had a strong personality. He excused her indifference, her sarcasm, and even the time she humiliated him in front of friends. When he tried to voice his pain, she would either laugh it off or change the subject. Every time he spoke up about how he felt, she dismissed it, telling him He was too sensitive, too intense. Soon, James began to doubt his perception. He would lock himself in the bathroom, questioning whether he was losing his mind, but he didn't recognize it as gaslighting, not yet. Instead, he convinced himself that the problem was him. If I could just be more patient, more understanding, stronger, maybe she'd become the woman I first met again. One night, after a particularly harsh argument where she screamed that he was useless and walked away, leaving him standing there alone, James went for a walk. His heart was heavy, filled with a weight he didn't understand. He sat on a park bench, the world feeling distant and cold. For the first time he thought, what if this isn't love? What if this isn't okay? In that moment, he remembered something he had read in a Jung book. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their soul. Something inside him broke open, and he realized that this was exactly what he had been doing his whole life, avoiding the truth, staying in a relationship that wasn't nurturing or healthy because he feared being alone, feared facing the void within himself. The next day, James made the life-changing decision to book a therapy appointment. He didn't know what to say, only that he was lost. He cried. He felt empty, confused, and exhausted, unsure of why he loved someone who made him feel so small. His therapist looked at him with compassion and told him something that would change everything. You're not in love. You're trapped in an unresolved emotional repetition. It was a harsh truth, but it was the beginning of his healing journey. Every therapist session became an opportunity to face parts of himself he had buried for years, his wounded inner child, his anger, his need for approval. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in years, James felt alive. He started reading Jung with newfound devotion, underlining powerful phrases that felt like mantras to him. There's no awakening of consciousness without pain. What irritates us in others leads to self-knowledge. Your vision will clear only when you look into your heart. As he worked through his emotional layers, James began to understand why he had tolerated such unacceptable behaviors for so long. His first experience with love had been emotional abandonment, and he had unconsciously normalized being ignored and dismissed. To him, it felt familiar, and familiarity often feels like safety, even when it's toxic. What he had mistaken for love was merely an emotional trap, a way of surviving the wounds of his past. One afternoon, after yet another argument with her, James felt something shift inside him. He didn't feel guilt or anxiety anymore. Instead, he felt clarity. For the first time, he wasn't confused, and that clarity was his first act of dignity. He didn't shout, beg, or plead. He simply said, "No more." She looked at him bewildered and told him he would regret it. She said no one would ever love him like she did. But James now knew something he hadn't known before. Love that doesn't respect is not love. It's possession, shadow, control. He was no longer willing to play a role in a story that suffocated him. The days after that decision were difficult. There was loneliness, emptiness, and moments of doubt. But each time he thought of going back, he read his notes from therapy, returned to his sessions, and reminded himself of the promise he had made to his inner child. I won't leave you alone anymore. Rediscovering himself. The journey of self-love. That promise became his sacred contract with life. Slowly, James began rediscovering himself. He walked without fear, ate without guilt, read without criticism, and laughed without needing permission. He understood that he wasn't weak for having tolerated so much. He was strong for choosing to leave. As Jung had said, the encounter with oneself is the most terrifying act there is, and James had faced it. He was wounded, yes, but he was also more whole than he had ever been. He started surrounding himself with people who validated him, who listened, who cared for him. For the first time, he understood that love didn't have to hurt. It could be tender, kind, and supportive. When she texted him months later, asking him to come back, James didn't feel fear or anxiety. Instead, he felt compassion, not for her, but for the part of him that once needed to be loved by someone who didn't know how to love. He blocked her number calmly and without regret, and continued walking forward. He didn't need to prove anything to her anymore. He had already proved everything to himself. The real miracle, finding himself. The real miracle wasn't leaving her. He was finding himself. After years of emotional betrayal, inner abandonment, and unheard silences, James had finally found his true self, and that was all he needed. When he shared his story in a support group, others began to cry because they saw themselves reflected in his words. They understood that they weren't alone, that they too could break free, that they too could learn to love themselves again. James no longer sought love to validate himself. He sought to share, to give, to build something real. He was no longer an emotional beggar, constantly seeking approval or affection. He was a complete being living with awareness, calm, and gratitude. And from that place, everything changed. The truth of awakening. The deepest truth James discovered was this: there are behaviors you should never have tolerated, but today you know you don't have to do it again because you've awakened. That awakening, coming to understand his worth, his dignity, and his right to love, was the greatest transformation he could have ever hoped for. And no one, no matter how hard they tried, could make him forget his value ever again. He had awoken to the truth that love isn't begged for, it's honored. And that truth became the foundation for a life where he no longer tolerated mistreatment, where he was free to love himself first, and where he could embrace the relationships that nourished him without fear of losing himself. The journey wasn't easy, but it was worth every step. And now, James walks forward with confidence, knowing that the path to true love begins with the love he gives himself. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons helpful, please comment number 5 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. 2. Analysis of the story. James's journey is a powerful example of Carl Jung's concept of individuation, the process of returning to oneself through confronting the unconscious. This journey is not just about leaving a toxic relationship, but about leaving behind a version of himself that was emotionally dependent on others for validation and survival. What begins as a story about a man trapped in unhealthy patterns becomes, at its core, a profound narrative about reclaiming self-worth and self-love. The first step of James's journey is the realization that he wasn't in love, but rather in an emotionally dependent relationship. Jung often warned about the dangers of projection, which occurs when we project our unconscious needs onto others, often idealizing them in ways that distort reality. In James, he didn't love his partner for who she truly was. He loved what she represented in his unconscious and idealized figure, meant to fill the emotional void left by his father's absence and his mother's inability to provide healthy emotional boundaries. This is not authentic love, it is emotional survival. Jung's famous quote, "What you don't make conscious becomes your destiny," applies perfectly to the situation. His unconscious emotional patterns rooted in childhood experiences of abandonment and neglect were unconsciously driving his actions. Judge James's desperate need to be loved, his tendency to silence himself, and his willingness to tolerate disrespect were all unconscious attempts to repeat his early experiences, hoping for a different resolution. Freud's compulsion to repeat explains this phenomenon. When unresolved trauma is repressed, the unconscious mind continues to recreate those original wounds to resolve them, albeit in a distorted way. What's fascinating about James is that rather than explicitly asking for love, he seeks it through his actions by pleasing, silencing himself, and justifying his partner's behavior. This is what Erich Fromm described as immature love, a love that prioritizes possession over freedom, authenticity, and personal growth. James wasn't asking for love. He was asking for validation, approval, and safety, things he hadn't received as a child. The moment when James starts to doubt his perception is a key turning point in his transformation. This is the classic effect of gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation where the victim is made to doubt their reality. Jung warned that when someone cannot trust their intuition or judgment, they are at the mercy of external control. James's struggle with self-doubt is not a sign of weakness, but of the psychological manipulation he was enduring. His gaslighting experience marks the deep emotional confusion that comes from being emotionally entangled in a toxic relationship. Decision to seek therapy is the pivotal moment in the story. Therapy, in this case, is not a magical fix, but a shift from guilt to awareness. Jung taught that awareness is the first step toward healing. By recognizing the toxic patterns in his life, James began to break free from the unconscious scripts that had been written for him by his past. He could no longer blame himself for the dysfunction of the relationship. He could only begin to understand how he had unknowingly perpetuated it. In therapy, James confronts his shadow, a Jungian concept that represents all the parts of ourselves that we suppress or reject. The shadow includes emotions like anger, sadness, and the desire to set boundaries, all of which James had repressed for years. Through this confrontation, he integrates his shadow and stops being a passive victim of life. He becomes an active participant, reclaiming his power. James's reading of Jung becomes an important part of his healing process. His underlined phrases are not just random thoughts. They are anchors that help him connect with the new truths he is starting to grasp about himself. These mantras ground him in the knowledge that not everything that hurts is love, not everything that stays is good, and not everything familiar deserves to be repeated. This growing awareness is a direct reflection of his individuation process, a painful but necessary journey toward becoming who he truly is. One of the most profound shifts in James' transformation occurs when he begins to let go of his persona, the image of himself as the perfect, enduring man who sacrifices his needs for the sake of others. Jung explained that the ego must surrender for the soul to merge, and this is precisely what James does. He lets go of the false self he had constructed to survive emotionally, allowing his true self to emerge in its place. The therapist's role in James is not to provide answers, but to act as a mirror, reflecting patterns and holding space for his transformation. Therapy doesn't tell him what to do. It helps him see who he has been so that he can decide who he wants to be now. The therapist provides containment and confrontation, offering a safe space where James can begin to understand and reclaim his authentic self. An important psychotherapeutic technique that James engages with is writing to his inner child. This act of reparenting is essential for emotional healing. By promising to never abandon himself again, James is taking responsibility for the care and love that his inner child needs. This reparenting process is a profound act of self-love that fosters deep emotional repair. Over time, such practices reduce anxiety and increase self-compassion, which is vital for building a healthy relationship with oneself. James' moment of saying no more isn't born of anger, but of clarity. As Jung stated, consciousness hurts at first, but then it liberates. Judge James' decision is not about revenge or punishment, it's about self-respect and protecting his healing journey. Blocking her isn't an act of vengeance. It's a boundary, a form of self-care. Setting boundaries in this way is one of the highest forms of self-love because it prioritizes his emotional well-being. The new relationships James forms after his healing are not magical or perfect. They are simply aligned with his new inner vibration. Jung's wisdom that when you transform internally, your external world reconfigures rings true here. James no longer seeks validation from others. Instead, he seeks relationships that reflect his integrity, self-respect, and authenticity. James is ultimately about returning to oneself, a journey of self-rediscovery and empowerment. As Viktor Frankl so wisely said, the meaning of life is what allows you to endure any pain. For James, the meaning of his life was found in his inner reconnection. By confronting his wounds, he found his strength, and through that strength, he could help others heal too. This is the archetype of the wounded healer, a figure who turns their suffering into wisdom and shares that wisdom with others. 3. Reflection questions. Have you ever stopped to think how many times you've mistaken love for the fear of being alone? How many times have you held on to a relationship out of habit, guilt, or the absurd idea that the bad you know is better than the unknown? How long will you keep justifying mistreatment as bad moments? How long will you believe that setting boundaries makes you selfish, when in reality, it's what brings you closest to your authentic self? Can you recall the last time you stayed silent to avoid losing someone? What did you lose of yourself in that silence? What would happen if today you chose to speak, not to hurt, but to honor your truth? Have you considered that every time you tolerate the intolerable, you're giving the other person permission to continue? Your silence is interpreted as acceptance, and your soul registers it as abandonment. What does it say about you that you keep seeking love from people who don't know how to care? What old story are you reliving? Is your partner truly the source of your pain, or are they simply a reflection of a wound that has been there all along? Where is your voice in this story? Where's your no more? How much longer will you wait for the other to change while you continue dimming your light? As we've explored today, Damien's journey is a powerful reminder that true healing comes from within. It's about recognizing the patterns we've tolerated, reclaiming our self-respect, and choosing to honor ourselves above all else. We don't have to remain trapped in cycles of emotional dependency or accept love that diminishes us. By confronting our shadows and embracing our true selves, we unlock the power to transform not only our relationships, but our entire lives. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What is one thing you've learned from Damien's story that you will bring into your own life moving forward? Comment below and share with us how you plan to take a step toward honoring your truth and setting healthier boundaries. If you found this video helpful, please leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe to our channel so we can continue this journey together. Thank you for watching, and remember, your path to self-love and freedom begins with one courageous choice.